In today's video, we have the latest trade talk from around the league, including some updates on the Calgary Flames and some of their key players that are pending UFAs. We also have another proposed trade on William Nylander, another idea where he might end up if things do not work out for him to re-sign in Toronto. We actually have a confirmed small trade as well between the Ottawa Senators and Montreal Canadiens. Another update on the Mike Babcock situation, a bunch more PTOs, some signings, and news in the PWHL as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about today. We might as well kick things off with the actual trade that took place just a short time ago that was announced here on social media between the Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Canadiens. It's a fairly minor deal, but the Ottawa Senators have traded prospect Jakub Novak, who was a 2018 7th-round selection, played a few years at Bentley University, then transferred to Northeastern, where he played parts of 2 seasons. Last year, after his college season at Northeastern completed, he did play in the East Coast League as well for the Allen American. So he's never signed an NHL contract. He either would have signed either an ECHL-only deal or it might have even been an amateur tryout at that level. It's hard to say exactly, but he was briefly under contract to be able to play there to finish out the season. He's 24 years old. He plays left wing and center. Obviously, I assume based on where he played at Northeastern, good chance Ken Hughes and Marty St. Louis are probably familiar with this guy. Obviously, they have a strong connection into the college hockey scene in the Eastern U.S., so I'm assuming they must have some kind of connection to be familiar with this player. Obviously, they have a pretty deep reserve list already in Montreal. A little surprising that they take on yet another former pick here. It's been 5 years since he's been drafted, but at this point, he's ready to hopefully play at least in the American Hockey League. So he goes from the Sens to the Habs for future consideration. So there's nothing at this point going back to the Ottawa Senators. So that player's signing rates will go to Montreal. They'll have to get him signed to play somewhere within their organization for the coming season. Now, as I mentioned, we have several other updates. We might as well kick things off with a hot topic that kind of was all the buzz yesterday, and that's the whole Mike Babcock, Columbus Blue Jackets situation, which got a ton of press across all the major media outlets, including all through social media as well. Of course, Mike Babcock was accused of a few things by the guys on Spit and Chicklets podcast, mainly Paul Bissonnette, who said he had information from an existing player. Basically put his complaint through to Bissonnette to kind of make points on the podcast, talking about how Babcock was trying to get to know his players, and one of the exercises he was doing was asking them to go through their phones and look at their pictures and things like that nature to get to know them. Of course, then later in the day, we get an update from a statement from the team itself, which was a statement from Babcock and Captain Boone Jenner. Boone Jenner was a player that was mentioned by Bissonnette in his report, saying that he was one of the guys that was that went through this exercise with Babs, and certainly, I think put him in a tough spot, to be completely honest. Regardless, I have no doubt Bissonnette's information is something he felt strongly about, something he felt was completely legit, had great sources, including an active player who was likely through it. But everybody else involved closer to the situation is denying it. Of course, Babcock did admit that, yes, he did look at some pictures and did get to know his players and things like that, but it was not portrayed in the right light. Babcock said essentially that when they were talking, he asked if he could see some pictures to help get to know them. Like, show me some pictures of your family. Show me, do you have any pictures you'd like to share? So they kind of show me, what your summer was like, things like that. The veteran players on the team, including Johnny Gaudreau, who interviewed for the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, which just came out today. He was asked about it. He said he did confirm it was something that happened, but he had no problem with it at all. He said the way he was portrayed on the podcast wasn't, characterized properly, basically. Of course, Boone Jenner's statement says the same thing, but there is a lot of young players on that team. It's a very young Jackets team. I do wonder if maybe one or more of the younger players maybe didn't like that scenario, and maybe they weren't comfortable, and because of their young stature with the team, maybe weren't comfortable saying anything to the coach and decided to go about. I don't know. I'm just speculating. At the end of the day, At this point, it doesn't really look like anything's really going to come from it. But we did learn earlier today that from a number of reporters, including Katie Strang, who reports for The Athletic, the NHLPA is still doing their due diligence and still looking into this. I mean, I would imagine this is going to be something that's, probably extensively looked into by the PA. Their job is to protect the players, and certainly if players are in uncomfortable situations with their coaches, that's something they're going to want to be taking a look at. So I honestly don't think this is the end of this situation that we're going to be hearing about it, but at the same time, it's not looking likely, at least as of right now, that anything will come from it, but we'll have to wait and sit back and see if the PA actually is able to substantiate anything or not. But certainly Bizinat and Mike Commodore, who had out a video later, they're doubling down, saying their information is 100% legit and that the players are just not comfortable coming out to confirm it. It's just that simple, and they want Babcock to knock off his tactics that he's been doing for years. Frankie Corrado, former NHL player, now works for TSN. Of course, he spent some time under Babs in the Leafs organization. He made an appearance on one of the TSN radio programs this morning with Carlo Colaiacovo, also another former Leaf player. And he talked about his own personal experience with Babs. He couldn't comment on this exact situation because obviously he's not a part of it and hadn't spoken directly to any players involved. But, didn't have a great personal situation himself, and said that there were certainly some tactics used by Babs that made him and many players feel uncomfortable. So we'll have to see what happens, but it is what it is, I guess. We'll see if anything comes from it, but right now it's looking like everything is going to be heavily scrutinized that Babcock does. I think he should expect that based on his past, and we'll see. But right now the NHLPA will look into it, and we'll hear, I guess, again, if anything more comes from it. A bunch of PTOs were announced today, including the Arizona Coyotes, who actually put out a list of 11 players they've invited to camp on PTOs, 9 of which are not players that have NHL history, so we're not going to get into those, or either players that were in the American League or coming out of junior that are free agents that are looking for work. But a couple of names you would know. One would be Ryan Dzingel, who's played there before. He's kind of a little bit of an NHL journeyman lately. He's had a hard time kind of sticking and getting any kind of consistency in the last couple of years. But he's going to the Coyotes camp, as well as former high draft pick of the Vancouver Canucks defenseman Olli Juolevi. So they will be amongst several players in Coyotes camp with PTO status. The Devils are bringing in former Philadelphia Flyer prospect Max Willman on a PTO as well. And we also got a couple of signings. Oh, actually, the Devils, actually have a second one. They've also signed, this one's not a PTO, though. They've signed Keith Kincaid, who makes a return again to the Devils. He gets a 1-year, 2-way contract. Now, if you remember, Keith Kincaid had already signed a contract with the American Hockey League Chicago Wolves. Now, remember, the Chicago Wolves are no longer an NHL-affiliated team in the AHL. They are independent. So players who have contracts there are allowed to have other deals, but essentially how this is going to work is he will be able to go to Devils camp, assuming he doesn't make the team, which is unlikely. They would probably sign him to want to be like their number 3 or whatever. Then he'll report to Chicago instead of the Devils affiliate. But he'll be able to be recalled from Chicago if they need him. So it's just a little bit of insurance, and to be honest, I don't even think they're going to have to pay him unless they actually recall him. So he gets at least a path for him to get to the NHL should a need arise, I guess. The Winnipeg Jets have finally come to terms as well with one of their RFAs, Declan Chisholm. He gets a 1-year, 2-way deal at $775. When you see a deal like that, it also makes you wonder, what took so long? I mean, it's 2-way, it's league minimum. You can't imagine that they couldn't have come to terms much sooner. The New York Islanders have signed one of their prospects as well. They've come to terms on a 3-year entry-level contract with prospect Isaiah George. Some news out of the PWHL today. They got their first big sponsorship, and it's coming from Canadian Tire. Now, Canadian Tire used to be a big sponsor of Hockey Canada's men's program, and of course, after everything first broke last year, of course, they lost a lot of their sponsors. They've since gotten some back and a few new ones, but Canadian Tire never went back with Hockey Canada under the men's program, and they did, obviously they still continue to do a lot in the hockey world for sponsorships. Of course, they're the naming rights holder at the Ottawa Senators Arena in Canada, of course, the Canadian Tire Center, so they do play a big role there. They obviously do other things too, but they're going to be the sponsor for the upcoming PWHL draft, which is going to be held on September the 18th. So that's great to see them getting involved. They had previously committed to putting at least 50% or more of their sponsorship money that they were going to be spending on a yearly basis into the women's hockey programs. So this is nice to see them getting involved. And we also were able to confirm the draft is actually going to be taking place at the CBC headquarters in Toronto. And it's going to be live streamed and aired on CBC Sports on their website. So it's not going to be on TV, but at least the event's going to be live streamed. It's going to be in the afternoon of the 18th. So it's going to be a big day for that league getting up and running and getting their rosters filled out. So certainly recommend people take some time and certainly check things out. Some news out of Ottawa as well in regards to their sale. I know obviously the NHL right now is in Vegas for their North American portion of the players' media availability that they've been doing that they always do before the season. And Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly is out there, and he confirmed that the Senators' sale might not actually close this week. It might be into next week. I know the new owner, Michael Andlauer, was hoping to have a sit-down. There was a big event planned by Ottawa Mayor Mark Sutcliffe that's supposed to take place Thursday. Andlauer was supposed to be the special guest. He's not going to be because they want to do that with him as the owner, as a way to kind of get him in front of the city a little bit more, into the local community. And well, he doesn't want to do that until he's officially the owner, and that's not going to happen by Thursday. Originally, they were hoping this week by Tuesday. We heard everybody was working overtime trying to get things done, but now they're saying it could be end of this week, or it could even more than likely is going to push into next week. And they're hoping that before camps open up next week, that it gets done. So we're probably looking at the first couple of days of next week before this is all signed, sealed, and delivered, and the Andlauer officially has full control. Now, as I mentioned as well, we get some updated trade talk around the league. We're going to talk a little bit about a scenario involving Willie Nylander here in the Leafs in a few minutes, but first we get some updates on the Calgary Flames. Of course, at the Flames golf tournament that was taking place, many of their players were there, including Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin, who both spoke to reporters, gave some quotes and some comments about their personal situations. Elias Lindholm was asked about the future again, and he didn't really have much to say. He was pretty short and brief, and he just said that he had already said publicly that he's willing to stay, and that's all he would comment on the situation. I know Eric Francis of Sportsnet said that his personal feeling on it was that he didn't think that Lindholm was overly convincing, that he was really, that anxious about wanting to stay. I know Craig Conroy made a comment saying that Lindholm would like to stay, and it's up to them to figure out a contract, and that they're working on it. We'll see, but the reporters there just didn't get a good vibe that Lindholm was, I guess, as serious as fans are probably hoping he is. When it comes to Noah Hannafin, Craig Conroy did say that he did confirm, which we already heard before, but Conroy confirmed that earlier in the offseason, Hannafin did make it known that he was not intending on re-signing, but he said just because he said that in the offseason, it doesn't mean that he's going to, end up doing that. That maybe he could stay. Anyway, so I was like, well, based on what we had heard, it didn't sound overly optimistic. I mean, based on the reasons and everything. And of course, Hannafin himself later did make comments and said that he had initially said that he likely wasn't going to re-sign, but ultimately that it was really up to this season to see how things went, that he was just kind of in wait-and-see mode, essentially. So I guess when it comes to Lindholm and Hannafin, yes, contracts and their extensions are certainly part of this. I honestly think with Lindholm, it's more about money. And with Hannafin, I think it's more of a case of, if the situation is too good to pass up, I'll stay. Otherwise, I'd like to go back to the U.S. and play closer to friends and family. At least that's the impression I get. I could be way off. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll only have to wait and see, and time will tell, as they say. But that's the impression based on what reporters are saying, based on the comments from the players, and my own personal opinion on the matter. I know, like I said before, we talked about Hannafin To Buffalo, it makes a ton of sense. I think the Flames could get a real good return from a team like the Sabres who want to add another top 4 defenseman. I think he'd be a great candidate there. And when it comes to Lindholm, I think if the Flames pony up a big enough contract, and we're probably talking north of $9 million per year, then there's a good chance that Lindholm could stay. If they don't want to go there, if they feel that's too much, then it's not going to be good. I've heard some people say that they may have no choice but to pony up and pay Lindholm because clearly, his decision to stay or not could have a big dictation on how things go for Jonathan Huberdeau, who just signed a massive contract. I'm like, well, yeah, maybe, but really, at the end of the day, if Lindholm leaves, can they not take that money they could have spent on him and find another player that could play with Huberdeau? Huberdeau's a good enough player. He should be able to play with a variety of people. Yes, it could be an impactful situation, but I don't know. I still don't personally have the greatest vibe and feel that these guys are going to stay, but I guess we'll see what kind of money Craig Conroy ponies up to them. I know a lot of people have been making their predictions lately, and there's a lot of media people have had their predictions out already. I haven't yet made mine. And a lot of them have the Flames missing the playoffs, or maybe just kind of being on the cusp of a wild card spot, and that's it. So we'll have to see where things go, but based on some of the reporters' comments, I don't know that they really gave a lot of good vibes today that they're going to end up signing and staying in Calgary. So we'll see. When it comes to Willie Nylander, I know Darren Dreger did a hit on Overdrive on TSN today, talking about a few things, essentially saying Nylander's back in town, which means he's going to be talking more to his teammates, he's going to be talking more to different people in the organization, including the GM Brad Treliving, and will certainly have an ability to kind of take things into his own hands here as far as getting something done if he decides he wants to do that. All indications before were that Willie had no rush whatsoever and was essentially willing to wait things out and see how things go. I don't think Nylander's in any hurry at all. If the Leafs come to him with a phenomenal deal, maybe he'll take it. But as we've said before, the big focus with Nylander seems to be that he doesn't want to be that far behind Marner and Matthews when it comes to their contracts and what he's earning. He doesn't feel like he's that much of a step down and wants to be paid accordingly. And I can understand to a degree why he feels that way. He's also been one of the better Leaf performers in the playoffs, and the Leaf players tend to get a lot of scrutiny for not getting the job done in the playoffs, where for the most part he has. At the end of the day, I've seen some more speculation if things don't work out to keep an eye on the Colorado Avalanche. We're looking at a potential return of a real solid young defenseman, whether that be Bowen Byram, maybe a Samuel Girard, another young, great skating defenseman. A first-round pick could be included in there. They have some other younger players that might interest the Leafs as well. But you're looking at a young D and a first-rounder, like an exciting young, good skating D at that, and a first-rounder as a good starting point for a deal there. I mean, if Gabriel Landeskog in Colorado turns around and is not able to return, if his career is over, because he's missed significant time. And I know the Avalanche have said that they're optimistic and they're hoping that he can come back this year for the playoffs, but that's far from a guarantee and it's a long ways off. If that doesn't work out and he misses 2 years, the odds of him coming back are pretty slim at that point. It means they're going to have a lot more flexibility longer term, and they're going to have a big hole to fill on a longer term basis as well. And Nylander could be that kind of player to certainly satisfy the production needs that Landeskog used to provide. Now, he's a very different kind of player than Landeskog, but can give you similar, if not better, production. So I do understand why there might be interest there. I'm sure many teams around the NHL are keeping an eye on the Nylander situation in Toronto. But now that Matthews' deal is done, now that everybody's getting back to their cities and the season's getting close to starting, I would suspect the Leafs are going to want to try to get this done as early as they can. I'm sure they don't want it to drag on too long, but if we get into the season and we get a little bit further into it, like November or something, and nothing is done, then that's going to indicate that the odds are that Nylander's probably not going to sign, and he's going to want to wait till the end of the year, at which point the Leafs are, facing some pretty significant risk depending on how things go. But we'll see. If things don't work out between Nylander and the Leafs, do you think the Avalanche, or does it make sense on the landing spot? To me, it's a good return for Toronto, and it could be a good replacement for Landeskog if things go the way that they're trending right now on his career. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.